These triple chocolate mousse domes have a milk chocolate mousse, white chocolate ganache filling, a dark chocolate mirror glaze, chocolate cookie base, and caramelized cocoa nibs on the side. It really is a chocolate lover's dream. And I'm going to show you how to make this at home. Hi, I'm Astrid from the Sweet Rebellion, and today we're going to be making triple chocolate mousse domes. Now, as intimidating as these may seem, I'm going to take you through each element step by step, and you'll see that it's totally doable. So last week we made a chocolate mousse that uses both cream and eggs. This recipe we're making today does not contain any eggs, but it does contain gelatine. And that's because we want to set it into a shape using a mold like this. Our chocolate mousse is going to have a white chocolate ganache filling, which we're going to put in this mold. And then the whole chocolate mousse is going to be glazed with a dark chocolate mirror glaze and placed on a chocolate cookie base, giving you a delicious patisserie experience in your own home. So this is a recipe that I created myself, and you can find it in my recipe book, High Tea at Home. It's available at poetry stores, or you can order it directly from me. You can find a link to my website in the description bar below. For the chocolate cookies, these are the ingredients you'll need. 90 grams of butter, 100 grams of caster sugar, 180 grams of flour, 1 large egg, 20 grams of cocoa, and a teaspoon of vanilla essence. These chocolate cookies are really simple to make, and they just follow the creaming method, which means we're going to cream together our butter, sugar, then add the egg and vanilla essence, and lastly sift in our dry ingredients. Once the dough has come together, we're going to wrap it up in cling wrap and put it in the fridge for about an hour to chill. While our cookie dough is chilling, we're going to start on our caramelized cocoa nibs. These are going to go around the edge of the chocolate mousse to add a little bit of crunch, and also they hide any smears of the mirror glaze. Cocoa nibs are available at health stores, and if you can't find them, you could also use hazelnuts. Cocoa nibs are basically like unsweetened dark chocolate. They've got a very strong, bitter chocolatey taste, which is why it goes really well with the caramel. So the two ingredients we'll need are 50 grams of sugar and 25 grams or 3 tablespoons of cocoa nibs. We're going to melt our white sugar and heat it until it turns a nice amber color. When melting your sugar, you want to use a medium heat, and you'll see that the sugar starts to melt in the middle of the pan. You're going to want to use a heat-proof spatula to just guide the sugar on the edges towards the center and help it melt evenly. But don't be tempted to stir it, because that can cause some crystallization, which we don't want. Once you add your cocoa nibs, you've got to work very quickly. If your caramel starts to set, you're going to just have to reheat it on a low heat until it gets warm enough to spread onto your baking tray or silicone sheets. So this we're just going to set aside now for half an hour or so. It's going to harden, and then we're going to break it up into little pieces. The next step is to make our chocolate mousse, and for that you'll need 150 grams of chocolate, 250 ml of cream, 100 ml of milk, 2 tablespoons of water, and 3 grams of powdered gelatine. I like to use a mixture of half milk and half dark chocolate for this dessert, but it's totally up to you. So I like to chop my chocolate in a food processor before starting. And the reason why I do this is that these nice small pieces of chocolate are going to melt really quickly and easily. And also, chopping chocolate is a huge mission and takes ages to do by hand. You can either use powdered gelatine or gelatine sheets. In this recipe, they are actually interchangeable. You just need to use the exact same weight. So this is 3 grams of powdered gelatine, and if you use gelatine sheets, you'd need about 1.5 sheets, since that weighs 3 grams. The first step in making our chocolate mousse is to sponge the gelatine. I'm just going to sprinkle the powdered gelatine over the water and set it aside for at least 5 minutes. While the gelatine is soaking or sponging, we're going to melt together the chocolate and milk over a double boiler. Once your gelatine has bloomed, you can add it to the warm chocolate and stir until it's dissolved. And then we're just going to whip our cream and fold the whole lot together. Make sure that you start with really cold cream because this will help it to whip up to its full volume. We're going to be whipping our cream to soft peak stage. By now our chocolate mixture has cooled to room temperature, and I'm going to start by folding in 1/3 of the cream. Make sure that that's well combined before folding in the rest of the cream nice and lightly. Because our chocolate mixture contains gelatine, it will set if it starts to get cold. So we actually need to do this step fairly quickly so that the mixture doesn't set while you're folding your cream in. Now we're going to put our chocolate mousse into our semi-sphere molds. When you put your chocolate mousse into your mold, I suggest you place it on a board or tray because once your mold is full, it's really tricky to move it to the fridge without your chocolate mousse spilling out. So my chocolate mousse is going into the fridge now for at least 2 hours or until set. Our next element is our white chocolate ganache, and for this we just need 2 ingredients. All you need is 80 grams of white chocolate and 20 ml of cream. As I've already mentioned, it's always important to use the best quality chocolate that you can, even when working with white chocolates. Traditionally, when making a chocolate ganache, you use a ratio of 1:1 of chocolate to cream. However, for this ganache, we want the filling to be nice and firm and not too liquid. So we're using quite a bit more chocolate than we are cream. If you prefer a more liquid center, you can increase the cream to 40 ml. To make our ganache, we're simply going to melt the chocolate and cream in a double boiler. Then pour it into our mold and into the fridge. It's as simple as that. So now that our chocolate mousse is set and our white chocolate ganache is set, it's time to put the ganache inside the mousse. So now I'm just going to use a small scoop to remove some of the mousse and make space for the ganache. If you don't have a scoop, you can just use a teaspoon. If we were to put our chocolate ganache into the mousse before it had set, the ganache would just sink to the bottom. These are going to go into the freezer now, not the fridge. And that's because when we pour over our mirror glaze, we want them to be ice cold. Now for the fun bit. This is the part where we make our dark chocolate mirror glaze. The recipe itself is not that difficult. The tricky part actually comes in using the glaze when you pour it over your chocolate mousse. You've got to make sure that your mousse is ice cold and that your mirror glaze is at just the right temperature, which is between 28 and 30 degrees. So you will be needing a sugar thermometer for this recipe. This recipe uses liquid glucose, which is an ingredient that helps to prevent crystallization because we are heating our sugar, and it also adds a really nice glossy shine to the glaze. You can get liquid glucose at baking stores, or if you're overseas, you can use corn syrup instead. For the mirror glaze, you will need 150 grams of dark chocolate, 150 grams of liquid glucose, 150 grams of sugar, 10 grams of powdered gelatine together with 60 ml of water, 100 grams of condensed milk, and an additional 70 ml of water. For this recipe, we're going to heat together our sugar, liquid glucose and water in a small saucepan until it gets to 104 degrees. Then we're going to add our bloomed gelatine and condensed milk and pour that hot mixture over our chopped up chocolates. Then we're going to give that a minute or so until it's all nicely melted and then stir it together. We're going to use a stick blender to make sure that there are no lumps whatsoever, and then we're going to sieve it to remove any air bubbles, which is really important in a mirror glaze. Now our beautiful shiny mirror glaze is ready. We're just going to set it aside to cool while we bake our cookies. Our chocolate cookie dough has been chilling in the fridge for an hour, so it's nice and firm and ready to roll out. I'm just going to dust the counter with a little bit of flour so that it doesn't stick, and then I'm going to use a 7 centimeter cookie cutter. We want the cookie to be the same size as our chocolate mousse so that it fits nicely on top. These are going to go into a 180-degree oven for 8 to 12 minutes. So now our caramelized cocoa nibs have set nicely, and we're just going to bash them with a rolling pin to break them up. So these are our nice crunchy caramelized cocoa nibs that we're going to put on the edge of our chocolate mousse domes. You can make these up to 3 or 4 days in advance, and just be sure to store them in an airtight container, because as soon as they're exposed to humidity, they're going to get really sticky. Our cookies have finished baking, and I'm just going to let them cool on the tray for about 5 minutes and then transfer them to a cooling rack to cool completely. Now, because these cookies are going to be the base of our chocolate mousse domes, we don't want them to be too hard and brittle. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to cut through with your fork. So rather don't overbake them, rather go a little bit under than over the baking time. Now for the fun part, guys, we are ready to assemble our triple chocolate mousse domes. So what we've got here is our frozen chocolate mousse with the white chocolate ganache center, and these are really nice and cold, which they need to be so that the glaze will set when it hits them. So I'm just going to unmold these onto a baking tray that's covered with a cooling rack, and that's so that all the mirror glaze that runs off can be collected in our tray and reused at a later date. It's important that your mirror glaze is at the right temperature. If it's too warm, it will be very thin and run off the chocolate mousse and could even melt it. And if it's too cold, it will be thick and gloopy and not coat your mousse domes nicely. When you finish glazing your chocolate mousse domes, you'll see there's quite a bit of glaze left over in your baking tray. You can just scrape this into a bowl or a jug and keep it in the fridge for up to a week. The trickiest part of this whole dessert is transferring your glazed chocolate mousse dome onto the cookie. One way to do this is using 2 toothpicks, inserting one into each side of the chocolate mousse dome and then quickly lifting it onto the cookie and carefully removing the toothpicks. It does sometimes leave little holes in the side of the mousse dome though that you'll need to cover up with a little bit of extra mirror glaze. My preferred way to do this is to use a palette knife and a cake slicer. So gently slide one under each side of the chocolate mousse dome and then carefully lift it onto the cookie and gently remove them. Remember that you can cover up any little smears or bumps with your caramelized cocoa nibs. Once the glazed chocolate mousse dome is on the cookie, we're just going to use a teaspoon to gently press some of the caramelized cocoa nibs around the edge. It's best to do this just before serving because these are going to get a little bit sticky if you do this in advance. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you try this recipe at home, I'd love to see your pictures. Please remember to tag me on social media. As you can see, this dessert requires a little bit more effort than most, but I'm sure you'll agree that it's really worth it for a special occasion or celebration.